Hello out there, all you wonderful people. This is Andre, the Game Idea Guy. Thank you once again for lending me your time and your ear, listening into another What If, and this one's going to be part two of the Segaverse, which I came up with the name after I recorded the other video, after I did the other audio. Yeah, that's when I came up with the name. This time I'm going to be connecting Virtual Cop to eSWAT, Virtual Fighter, and Fighting Vipers. Now, and I'm deliberately leaving Streets of Rage off because I'm doing that for the next one. The Streets of Rage is probably where a lot of these pings a lot of things will meet up and connect. So I'm just kind of putting that off a little bit. So that makes this one may not be very long. Now here's a couple small details, and they may not mean much outside of actually playing video games, but the character Janet from Virtual Cop 2, or is it Jeanette? People say that name differently. It's the same spelling sometimes, but they say it differently. So I'm just going to stick with Janet because that's the common pronunciation of it, at least as far as I'm concerned. But Janet from Virtual Cop 2 was put into fighting Fighters Mega Mix, which was a crossover title for Fighting Vipers and Virtual Fighter 2. I don't know why I got so hung up on that. And her stage in the game is the first level from Virtual Cop. So to me, this says that those fighting games are connected to that rail shooter. To put it into perspective, events that are happening in Virtual City and Virtual Cop are also, like, this city is also connected to the Virtual Fighter series as well as the Fighting Viper series. Now, as far as I am concerned, and this is what makes the most sense to me, Fighting Vipers and Virtual Fighter are tournaments that take place in Virtual City. And it would make sense that's the case. You don't have to take my you don't have to take my word for it, and I know it's a little bit of a stretch, but it makes a decent amount of sense. Because you don't really hear about like crime waves and stuff that happen in Virtual Cop, not Virtual Cop, Virtual Fighter or Fighting Vipers. You just deal with the fighting. Like, you don't hear about all these outside stories and things that are possible for it to be connected to. And again, that makes sense to me. Now, but you like, okay, playing Virtual Fighter 4 and doing the the kind of tour mode that they have on it, you're playing in a city. But the city itself isn't given a name as far as I remember. So if this tournament takes place in this massive city, like that you're moving about, arcades and different stuff in it, because I haven't played Beyond 4, unfortunately. That was back on PS2. But if this city is so unnamed, like many cities that happen to have conflicts go on in them in Sega's universe, why couldn't they be Virtual City? Even going way back to eSWAT, which was the original cop game that I can remember Sega making, that city was never named either. And the original, if I remember correct, the original Virtual Cop outfits, the outfits that the cops wore, even though they were colored differently, they're very similar to the outfits that the eSWAT team wore, the guy from eSWAT wore. It's probably just because it's it was what was known for police to wear at the time. But I would look at the Virtual Cop outfits as an update of the eSWAT teams. Maybe they, after having enough successful campaigns to stop like major gangs and stuff, they ended up with better equipment and with updated uniforms and stuff, and they maybe got elevated a little bit. So like it's just something that makes a lot of sense. And plus the eSWAT campaign, like you got to think about that. That was a long campaign for a police officer to take on. And thinking about it, the types of I guess you say thugs that you deal with in eSWAT are very similar to the type that you deal with in Virtual Cop. So like you got dudes with rocket launchers, with jetpacks and stuff like that that you have to shoot down. And it's again, it makes a lot of sense. Like that those two things would be connected that way. Like more gangs that are bigger and better, that have more access to technology, are like basically on the rise in this one city, and you're constantly having to take them down. Again, it makes sense to me to think of it that way, like that these teams or even Virtual Cop is like a like they're probably branches of different parts of the city, whereas the eSWAT team is one branch and Virtual Cop team was another branch or something like that. It doesn't have to be exactly the same, like, but you can get the gist that they're connected in some way. So, like, and I know a lot of people have no idea what fuck eSWAT is. just go ahead and look it up. I'm sorry. I've played quite a few different games in my time, and you're just going to have to deal with that. But you can probably look it up on YouTube. It's a 2D side-scroller. Kind of plays like Rolling Thunder. Like, maybe not exactly like Rolling Thunder, but there are some people who will know what Rolling Thunder is. And then there'll be others who are just like just as confused after hearing Rolling Thunder as they were hearing eSWAT. Like, why are you dropping all these old game names on us, Dre? But that said, I could see Virtual Cop and eSWAT both being connected or happening in the same place. Like, same area. Not necessarily exact same place, but the same. Those events happen within each other's vicinity, is what I'm trying to say. And the Virtual Fighter world, the Fighting Vipers, again, those are two tournaments that happen where we don't know the exact location of these tournaments and where they are. Like, but we know that everybody has to be in some relative proximity to each other. It just makes a lot of sense. So if everybody's in relative proximity, why am I yawning? If everybody's in relative proximity to each other, then that means that everything's happening pretty close knit, so that these tournaments can take place. If that's the case, then I would believe, and like since Janet was included in Fighters Mega Mix, her and Virtual Cop 1 stage, and I also think the Chicago area for Virtual Cop 2 was included in there. Like, those are hints as to, yeah, that's like the only area I think was actually named in Virtual Cop was like a Chicago area. It wasn't even like Chicago, the city Chicago. I think it was an area called Chicago within the city. But either way, those are included in that game. Like, and that gives a link that you can draw a connection with. Plus, like, you can't just say that like Janet and the two dudes from Virtual Cop, which I know their names, I just don't remember them right now. But you can't just say that they only shoot people. Like, you would think that they take them down physically. They have some sort of training to be able to subdue people physically, and that's what Fighting Vipers Fighters Megamix shows off for her. That she has that's like this close quarters combat training for taking down imminent threats or close threats. So, like, again, it just makes sense to me. Like, nobody has to agree with me. Like, but those things make sense to me. Like, that those connections are there. And it would make sense if she was, staking out a tournament trying to like get clues on like a case of some kind because like stuff is fishy around the virtual fighter tournament as well. I'm not so sure about the Fighting Vipers tournament. I know like Mahler wasn't exactly the best tournament host or whatever, but again, I haven't actually played the Fighting Vipers games themselves, which kind of sucks. But but I would assume like there was some not so great plans coming from both of those tournaments, and it would make sense that they would have someone staking it out, and Janet would be the optimum choice, I believe. Um, as far as like what they did with the character and promoting her, she'd probably be the optimum choice because she was like the face of Virtual Cop 2 anyhow. So it made more sense that she would be there rather than one of the other two lead characters who I can't remember their names right now. But I know one dude was blonde and one dude had brown hair, and that's all I remember about him. But to me, all of these worlds are laced together, like they're interconnected with each other, and that will also mean that if I interlace these, that Shinobi from the previous video is also connected to eSWAT, connected to Virtual Fight. Well, I already said Virtual Fighter, connected to eSWAT, Virtual Cop, and Fighting Vipers, like, and they're all linked together in some way, shape, or form. So, and one could argue that Neo Z is one of the gangs that's in the city. Though I do believe Shinobi actually does take place in Japan, for the most part. I could be wrong. I think I could definitely be wrong with that. Like I do believe that it's possible that it takes place in Japan, but just looking at it though and thinking about the gangs that were in eSWAT and in Virtual Cop, Neo Z could be like just like a bigger gang. That's really it. They're just like a bigger gang in that same city. Like that's literally all it would take. Like that's all they'd have to write it as. To be fully honest. But that being said, I don't really think I have much more for this one. Once I get down to Streets of Rage, then I think things will start to make a little bit more sense. Because there are more connections that could be made and interlaced that I think people will actually understand. So, thank you guys very much for listening. Keep your eyes and ears up for more stuff from me. And until the next time, enjoy your games. Peace out.